If you're caught up with the end of the School for Good and Evil, we're sure you're wondering just whose dagger it was that showed up through the vortex between worlds. Apparently, the knife and its owner will have a huge impact on the sequel, and in today's video, we'll discuss just why that's the case. We'll also talk a bit about how Feig hopes to make more sequels. So let's dive right in. First up, the dagger belongs to none other than Rafal. The end of the School for Good and Evil shows us that the characters managed to get their happy ending after all. Both Agatha and Sophie seemed like they might be able to drive off into the sunset, but not everything was rainbow and sunshine. We saw that Tedros' arrow pierced the vortex, and he could be heard calling out to Agatha. It's then followed by Rafal's dagger, which makes it look like he's definitely out there and still very much alive. Plus, Tedros might be in some real danger. We definitely think this is paving the way for a potential sequel for the Netflix movie. Rafal faking his death wouldn't be too surprising. After all, he's done it before, but we did clearly see him die when Agatha used Excalibur on him, so we're sure seeing his knife in the end definitely made many fans confused. Luckily, it seems that the movie's sequel will continue right from where things left off, and if there's one thing we know, it's that Rafal will probably be seen again in the sequel. For now, fans are left wondering just how he'll manage to return. There are many more story elements still left to cover in the story. It's based on the books written by Soman Chainani, and we'll likely see the plot delve deeper in the content of these books in the sequel. Next, how exactly is Rafal still alive? To keep Rafal from outright destroying both schools, Agatha and Sophie worked together at the end of the movie. Their combined efforts were able to make it so that Agatha was able to use Tedros' Excalibur to kill him. For the most part, we assumed that Rafal had actually died. After all, the magic that was destroying the schools had stopped. Plus, Tedros, who is held by Rafal's magic, was also stopped after Agatha made the blow. So it's clear that he did, in fact, die right there. But we've also seen how coming back from the dead isn't exactly out of the question either. We saw Agatha prove this to Sophie. At the end of the movie, Sophie sacrifices herself for Agatha after the fighting is said and done. Agatha sobbed over Sophie's body, and her tears apparently healed Sophie's wounds. Rafal claimed that Sophie was his true love, but despite this, she turned against him by the end of the movie, so we don't think she would have brought him back. We've got to keep in mind, Rafal has access to a bunch of blood magic that he could use to come back from the dead. And yes, this includes stuff that the audience doesn't even know about just yet. The book states that when he is back, it's in the form of a ghost. So while he might not be back entirely, he's still a huge threat to both Agatha and Sophie, and we'll likely see him be a problem in the sequel. Plus, here's how this dagger affects the sequel. Rafal's dagger, just magically making its way through the vortex, will obviously have some consequences, and the sequel for the movie will probably be affected because of it. At the end of the movie, Agatha and Sophie decide to go home, returning to their lives before they join the schools. But the fact that Rafal's still kinda out there implies that the two friends will probably not get the happily ever after they were hoping for. They'll undoubtedly be dragged back into the conflict at the schools and have to deal with whatever he's got cooking next. Tedros calling out to Agatha could imply that the romantic storyline is also far from finished. We're sure all these elements will come into play in the sequel. Plus, with the vortex being pierced and Rafal's dagger coming through it, we think there's a good chance that their village of Gavelden is also in danger. And that probably means that Agatha and Sophie won't really have a choice but to get involved again. They'll probably be hesitant at first, but we're sure they'll be back sooner or later. We suppose there wouldn't really be a movie otherwise, would there? Moving on, Paul Feig hopes to make more sequels for the School for Good and Evil. It seems Paul is on board to expand the storyline of the book series further. The 60-year-old director recently stated that his goal is definitely for it to be a franchise. He added that the plan going forward is to take the materials from the books and turn them into a potential franchise. Paul said that he loved the characters and the world, and the books are just a bunch of fun. It helps that they're also super dense, so there's enough content in there to have a long-running franchise with multiple sequels, assuming Netflix doesn't have a problem with that. Feig stated that even in just the first movie, there was a lot more book content that he wanted to add, but he wasn't able to fit it all in due to the runtime. It's true that the book series will probably allow for quite a few sequels, but we wouldn't be too surprised if Netflix somehow isn't convinced just yet, especially for multiple sequels. He added that if everything from the first book was added to the movie, the final product would probably cost billions of dollars. Okay, that might be a tad bit hyperbolic, but we suppose we do get what he's talking about. The books have a lot more details that probably wouldn't have made sense, especially in just a single movie. It's why a sequel feels like such a natural natural choice, but we'll have to see what Netflix has to say on the matter. Next, Paul described his plan on moving forward with the franchise. Feig further described his thoughts on how to handle the potential franchise. He mentioned that you have to take the things that the audience, the readers, and the fans love from books, and then they need to be retrofitted in a way that still feels original, but in a way that fans of the original source material are happy with. This is honestly a lot easier said than done, and we've seen countless studios struggle with this exact thing. The director also mentioned that you're going to have an audience who doesn't know about the books. There's also going to be people who are simply experimenting with the show and don't really care what it's based on, and so the films have to be made in a way where even they're able to get the most out of the experience. Paul apparently hates movies where audiences are expected to already know things from the source material even before watching the movie. We can't help but agree. Why should viewers be asked to do prior research before watching a film like we're still in high school? When creating the movie, Paul set out with the idea of making it in such a way that even people who've never read the books should be able to understand it fully. And that seems to be something he'll continue to do if he does get a shot at making some sequels. Finally, what can we expect to see from a potential sequel? The second The School for Good and Evil book is titled A World Without Princes, and while the first movie didn't really dive too much into its territory, there's already a significant change. The movie showed us that Tedros pierced the vortex between worlds, but in the books, it's actually Agatha who does that. The end goal is pretty much the same either way though. In the books, Agatha wishes for a different happy ending and wants to come back to the school to be with Tedros. When they return, Agatha and Sophie find out that quite a few things have changed around the school. Sophie, as expected, returns to her villainous ways. She tries to stop her friend from getting back together with Tedros. And of course, there's the looming problem of Rafal's ghost. We learn in the sequel that it's actually Evelyn Sater, the new dean of the school for girls, that brought him back. Rafal tries to get back together with Agatha and even makes an attempt on Tedros' life, causing the two to flee to safety. Sophie chooses to stay with Rafal, though, and the two friends once again begin fighting one another. There are a lot more physical and moral battles coming our way in the sequel, and all of it begins with Rafal's dagger coming through that vortex. Fans are really hoping Netflix picks it and lets us explore the wonderfully layered world of the book series. We've definitely got our fingers crossed. Let's hope Netflix agrees with us. What are your thoughts on Rafal's dagger and the many implications that it might have on the sequel to The School for Good and Evil? Comment below, give this video a thumbs up, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one!